Okay. Okay, English 2 students, if you're getting the notification of this and tuning in, great. If not, that's okay. So I just tune into this later. But I wanted to go through some of your Edgar Allan Poe poetry stuff from this week because on Monday you have a test on the poetry unit, not just Edgar Allan Poe, but anything we've looked at. So Edgar Allan Poe, Walt Whitman, oh Captain, my Captain, all the poetry we've looked at comes into play. So we're going to do a quick review of that in just a minute. But I didn't want to talk about Edgar Allan Poe. So you had the PowerPoint that kind of walked you through the different parts of the Raven poem. And if you remember from the video we watched before this whole COVID thing when we were looking at the cast of Amontillado, a lot to say right there. Edgar Allan Poe had an interesting life. And he married his much, much younger relative. And that whole weird kind of situation that many of y'all found kind of interesting in a weird way. But the poem that brought him great success was The Raven, even though he didn't make a lot of money off of this. And so that's what we wanted to study. And so when you're writing your fake Poe poems, the first question of that worksheet was looking at the line structure. So if you notice each 6 stanza line, there were a set number line always had 15, third line always had 16 again, fourth line and fifth line always had 15 syllables. This whole situation is stanza 7, where it sounds like 6 syllables, but you have to pronounce of with 2 syllables to make this line work. So there is one slight exception where he deviates from the formula, but otherwise it's 16, 15, 16, 15, 15, 7. And then I told you the rhyme scheme was A, B, C, B, 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 meaning 4 of the lines all share the same rhyme, whereas 1 and 3 don't really rhyme at all. So that was that. And then obviously you had the PowerPoint to go through the Edgar Allan Poe stuff. For the unit exam, what's going to happen for that so that you can be studying? Because obviously you'll want to study the poems you've already gone through. Look at the questions, look at my answers to the questions that we've reviewed in videos or online in the past. Then one of the things you want to look on is early on when we first started this poetry unit, I gave you the Know the Lingo the worksheet with a bunch of terms, things like simile, stanza, symbol, theme, tone, verse, these kind of words. A couple others that you might see on the test tomorrow: alliteration, allusion, assonance, ballad, consonants, diction, jambit, free verse, metaphor, meter, onomatopoeia, and rhythm. So there's 18 words there. You have those vocabulary words from the unit. I'd be studying those. You'll need to know the definition, but you'll also want to make sure you could recognize an example. So if I say something like, Sarah's 7 sisters slept soundly, it would be helpful to know that is alliteration, even though I haven't given you the definition of alliteration. So make sure you know the definition, but also that you can recognize an example of that. So maybe check out the Know the Lingo worksheet just to be sure. That'll be the first half of your exam, mostly vocabulary in that sense and identifying examples. The second part, I'm going to give you a few other questions where I'm going to give you a couple poems. You're going to have links to 2 other poems you haven't seen before. And you're going to be tasked with applying your how to read a poetry notes. And can you take a poem that you've never seen before, and you've had some practice in this, so to speak, and look for things like the rhyme scheme. So I'll give you a poem. The last name of the author of this poem is Graves. So a little hint there, but you'll get it on the test day, so don't need to worry about that. And I'll ask you what the rhyme scheme is for that. I might ask you what a slant rhyme is. It goes back to Know the Lingo. And might ask you to find where he does something like that, or where is there an allusion in one of these poems. So I'll ask you to look at these poems closely. There's 2 different poems, and there's about 6 questions between the 2 poems, about 3 per poem that I'll ask you to look into and figure out. So if you know how to find the rhyme scheme and count the syllables and things we've been doing in your exercise the last few weeks, you should be okay. But just make sure you're familiar with that terminology so that you know what I'm asking you for. And so, yeah, there's that. That really is pretty much it. I've got the test over here as I'm talking, so I'm making sure I am giving you an accurate review of what will be there. See, vocabulary, check. Self-application of some poems I'm going to give you, check. That's good. You'll have a couple short answer questions about those 2 poems as well. And one of the things I will ask you about for at least one poem will be the theme. So know the themes of the poems we've already studied and know how to find a theme maybe in one of these poems I'm giving you. And remember, the theme is the message of the poem. What are we supposed to take away? And that's not just the topic. Abraham Lincoln could have been the topic of "Oh Captain, My Captain." Yeah, you should be good for Monday. That'll be your task Monday. It's pretty much Monday. You'll take your exam, and the rest will be for SSR if you need to get caught up. If you don't, okay. We're going to talk about this book checks. We're going to probably utilize Zoom for book checks so that you can still talk it out. I promise, no writing for book checks. All right, so that's my quick review. Hopefully you've had a good week, and hopefully your parks reports are good. Otherwise, have a good weekend, and we'll talk more next week. See you later.